Hi everyone, it's Olga from Olga's Flavor Factory, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to the food processor, one of my most used and most appreciated kitchen appliances. If you have a food processor already and you're wondering all the different ways that you can use it more, or if you're considering buying one, this is exactly the video you should watch because I'm going to show you so many different things you can use it for so you can use it to its most full potential. If I show you everything this workhorse can do in one day, I honestly have no idea what we would do with all that food. So I'm going to break it up throughout the week and show you a few things each day. That way we can keep up with eating all the things that I'll be prepping. I store my food processor in a cabinet over there. And since I use it a lot, I have it where I can reach it very easily. If you have the space and the height to store it like this, you can do that. I don't have as much height in my cabinet, so I store it in two pieces like this. It's pretty easy to put it back together. Most food processors also come with a few attachments. These are the ones that I have. And I don't use these as often as I use this main thing, so I have them stored in the back. And I'll talk about the way that I use them a little bit later. The main function of the food processor is to break down food, your fruits or your vegetables, into smaller pieces quickly. So instead of chopping it by hand or grating it or whatever, you can put it in here and it will chop it up for you very fast. I just love that you can put an onion and carrots and celery, put it all into the food processor, and in a few seconds, it's all chopped up. This is great when I want to chop up vegetables into very small pieces, like for sauces, for meatballs, and lots of different things like that where I want a small consistency but not a puree. If you have a good food processor, then it will do this in very uniform pieces. So you can control how many times you pulse it and it will give you pretty uniform pieces. If the food processor doesn't do a very good job, then it will not give you uniform pieces. You're gonna have really big pieces and very tiny pieces. So you're gonna have to pulse it a lot more times until you reach a consistency that's way too small. I really like when you can control it and still be able to have bigger pieces when you need them or much smaller pieces if you want it much finer. One thing you have to keep in mind when you start putting food in the food processor is that you need to cut them up into smaller pieces because obviously if you put in one big onion and first of all, a whole carrot's not gonna fit in there anyway. So you want to break it up. Just take a few seconds to chop it into smaller pieces because that will definitely help a lot to break down your food into uniform pieces. A safety feature that this particular food processor has is that this metal probe needs to go right in here. Otherwise, it's not gonna turn on. See? Nothing. That way you can't stick your fingers in there and hurt yourself. So you have to put it right in here and then it will turn on. And then if you want to control how small the pieces are, you're gonna turn it on pulse, not on. If you turn it on, it's just gonna keep continuously turning. I would use the on button if I want to puree something very small. And I will most of the time use the pulse button. So now I'm gonna pulse it however many times I need until it's the consistency that I want. And then every so often, open it up, scrape down the sides so that the food that's, stuck on the sides can have better access to the knives and you're getting that consistency that we're looking for. Now, as you can see, I only pulsed it a few times and it's pretty consistent already. We do have a few bigger pieces in here, but if we pulse it a few more times, we'll get a very consistent texture. So if you want something a little chunkier, you can leave it chunkier. If you want to break it up into smaller pieces, just pulse it a few more times. That looks great, right? So this is really awesome for sauces, for soups, especially cream soups that you're gonna blend up anyway. So if you break it up like this, it's much faster. It'll cook faster too. So I really like this and it's great for salsas and pestos and things like that. And then you can do it even finer if you need it to be even smaller than this. I make adjika in the food processor. Adjika is so good. If you have not tried this recipe, you should. It's so delicious, and I can break down an entire big giant stock pot full of vegetables in just minutes. So this is awesome. Look at that. That was the food processor. I use the food processor for other things similar that have this kind of consistency, like pesto. I have a recipe for pesto in another video that I did. And then different tomato sauces, salsas, marinades, salad dressings, and things like that. So it will do such a beautiful job chopping everything up for you and save you a ton of time. You can use a blender for a lot of the things that the food processor can do, but the blender needs a lot more liquid to be able to move things around in there evenly. The blender is a great tool, I love it too, but I find that it's the best when you want to puree things like soup, smoothies, and stuff like that, that you want to be a really, really super fine consistency. It does not do as well of a job if you want something to still have some texture in it. Sometimes you don't need to add more liquid, so that is what the food processor does a great job at, and the blender won't. It will just stall and won't do it unless you add more liquid to it. And you don't want everything that you're cooking to be like a smoothie. So in some cases it's great, in other cases you need a different tool. And that's what the food processor is for. Another great thing about the food processor is that it doesn't absorb any odors. So I can make pesto or salsa in there, something with garlic and onions, wash out the food processor and make strawberry mousse in it right away, and it will not transfer those flavors and odors. One of the surprising things that I use my food processor for is to grind meat or seafood. A food processor is the best way to break down seafood because it's very delicate, so you can control it by pulsing it and break it down so it's not completely pulverized and it turned into a puree. I do this for salmon burgers, salmon patties, shrimp burgers, rybne kotlety or fish patties. Whenever I'm making fish patties, I will process everything in the food processor, all of my ingredients. So I'll get the vegetables in there. I always add onions and celery. I'll put them in there, pulse them a few times, take the vegetables out, put the fish right in there, pulse the fish a few times until I have the texture that I need. In just a few minutes, I have all of my ingredients prepped for that. If you don't have a meat grinder or you want to process just a small amount of meat for ground meat like ground chicken or ground beef, the food processor actually does a really terrific job at this. I do have a meat grinder and I will say it does a much better job than a food processor, but I absolutely hate washing it. I only take out the meat grinder if I'm gonna do at least 5 pounds of meat. Otherwise, it's not worth the hassle for me. So if I need just a small amount of meat, then I do it in the food processor, and let me show you what a good job it does. We're gonna be making burgers tonight, so I'm gonna grind up some beef. For the best results, cut up your meat into smaller pieces and then put it in your freezer for about 30 minutes or so. You want the outside of the meat to start to be frozen, but the center should still be soft. You don't want it to be frozen all the way through. But freezing the meat first really helps to break it up more evenly when you're using the food processor. Now, isn't this great? And I love that you can make the pieces bigger if you're making sausage or something. And by the way, these will make the most juicy, incredible burgers ever. In just a few minutes, I have all of this meat ground up. It's so easy. If you're meal prepping or you want to slice or grate a whole bunch of food, then these attachments come in really handy. So as you can see by these holes, this one is like a box grater. You can grate cheese on here, carrots, zucchini, potatoes, whatever. There's so many things you can do with this thing. And this one is a slicer, so this one is nice for cabbage, potatoes, Brussels sprouts. That is one of my favorite things to use this for. Remember that the food processor isn't even going to turn on unless this metal thing is in the top. So fill up your top with vegetables approximately up to here. That way the metal probe is inside the lid and it disarms that safety feature, and you'll be able to turn it on and work the food processor. How beautiful is this? And you can meal prep this in advance. Just put it in your refrigerator. Put a paper towel either in the container or the bag that you're gonna store this in, and it'll stay fresh for days. I am not gonna take out my food processor and use it to grate just one carrot. It's much easier to just get out your box grater, grate up one carrot or a little bit of cheese. But if you want to do a lot of carrots, or you're grating a lot of different things, like when I'm meal prepping, I use my food processor a lot because then I'm doing so many different things for like a week's worth of food, or if I'm cooking for a big party or something like that, then this comes in really handy. Also, if you want to grate a lot of cheese, if you're buying it in blocks and you want to grate all of it, this is great for that. Beets is another one of those vegetables that is wonderful to use the food processor on. You can grate a whole bunch of them at once if you're making a salad or something like that, or borscht. This is wonderful. If you love potato pancakes, the food processor might just become one of your best friends, because in just a few minutes you'll have your batter ready to go and start frying, instead of standing and grating it using a box grater, worrying about your fingers, and it takes a long time. If you like potato pancakes where you grate the potatoes on the large holes of a box grater, then you can just use the attachment that comes with it and do it that way. I grew up with Belarusian potato pancakes and we use the smallest holes of the box grater, so I'm gonna use this knife and it does a wonderful job. So once again, cut up your vegetables, so the potatoes, and then I always use an onion, so I'm gonna put it right in there with the potatoes. So still they're kind of big chunks. This only takes a minute. And put it in the food processor. Just look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Does a perfect job. I'm gonna add the rest of the ingredients for the potato pancake batter right into the food processor and pulse it right up, and then it's gonna be ready to be cooked. Another thing that I make almost exclusively in the food processor is pie dough. It works so well for this. The knife blades cut through the butter perfectly. It does it so effectively, and you're not over handling it with your warm hands and melting the butter, because you want to have those bits of butter, like pea-sized bits of butter throughout the dough, because once you roll it out and you bake it, the butter is gonna melt and it's gonna create pockets of air and make the pie dough so tender and flaky. It's perfect, it's so easy. I do this all the time. I also like making fresh pasta dough in the food processor. You guys, it's so easy in the food processor. You just blend everything together. It does a perfect job, and homemade pasta is such a treat. Another thing I like to make in the food processor is peanut butter. It's so easy. The food processor does it so well. All you need are some peanuts. I also like to add a little salt and honey in there. It's great and my kids love it. You can use the food processor to chop up nuts. It's great for it. And just keep pulsing it until you get the size that you want. There are so many natural oils in nuts that when you process them together, at first you're just gonna have a very fine consistency. Then it's gonna start looking like sand, a little bit wet. And after a while, you're gonna start to get peanut butter. I also love making almond flour in the food processor. It is awesome for lots of different recipes and it's so easy. Just add the blanched almonds to the food processor and mix it up until it's very fine. Since the homemade peanut butter doesn't have any added preservatives or emulsifiers, it's not going to keep as long as store-bought peanut butter will. I'll usually make a batch and then we'll eat it within the next few days. My kids love it spread in English muffins with some bananas and some honey, or they like to dip apple slices in peanut butter. I don't have to tell you how to use peanut butter. Peanut butter is great in so many recipes. Can you hear that? It's really frozen. If you want to, you can also add some frozen mangoes, frozen pineapple. This will work really well too. Sometimes I even use strawberries. Sometimes if the fruit is a little bit too frozen, it's not going to blend up very well. So just let it thaw for just a few minutes. You don't want to defrost it completely, just thaw it slightly for a few minutes and then it should blend up into a creamy texture. Unfortunately, if your blender is not very powerful, it is not going to do this. So this might not be something that you may be able to achieve if you don't have a very good quality food processor. Okay guys, come over here. Look at that. Such a creamy, amazing texture. What is it? You guys know what this is.
Ice cream.
What kind of ice cream? Yup.
My favorite.
The food processor is so versatile, as you can see with all these examples that I shared. So I hope you picked up a lot of ideas of ways that you can use it. And if you haven't gotten one yet, you can make a decision whether or not this would be helpful in your kitchen or not. So I absolutely love it. It's one of the best tools to help you with cooking from scratch and meal prepping to make it a lot easier on yourself. It saves me a lot of time and a lot of work. Now you've got lots of different ways to put that food processor to good use. Go to Olga's Flavor Factory and I'll have a blog post where I'll have all of the recipes linked in one place that I mentioned in this video. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you enjoy videos like this, and check out other videos where I share practical and useful information. I like passing on the tips that I learned through trial and error and just experience in the kitchen and pass it on to you. The things that you buy and take up space in your kitchen should serve you and be useful, not just take up space.